Uh, Thank you, Daria, for joining our Trust Talks. We had the opportunity to talk to different experts and discuss this topic from different angles and touch upon education, health, communication, even cyber reality. And I'm very excited to listen to your insights about the role of transparency in the communication. But before getting there, maybe overall you can share with us your observations about the trust between the society and the institutions in the two countries that you are engaged in.
Thank you so much, Alina, for inviting me. I think this is a great project, and it's really very interesting to hear different perspectives and views from different backgrounds on the topic. And what I would like to talk about is trust from society to institutions. And as we know, there are societies where institutions enjoy high level of trust. It's mostly these are sustainable democracies in Northern Europe. There are countries who enjoy medium level of trust. I would say this is more Eastern Europe. And there are societies with low trust in institutions, and mostly this is post-Soviet countries. And when I'm talking about institutions, it can be, for example, like the justice legal system, the police, the army, some religion institutions, trade unions, national governments, educational health, local public authorities. And I would like to talk about two countries, mostly it's Ukraine and the Netherlands, because I've been living in both for some time. And I wouldn't say that I can compare, because I think it is not right word to say compare Ukraine and the Netherlands, but just to give some observations how trust was developed or not developed in these countries. So about Ukraine, Ukraine is one of the states that regained its independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in most post-Soviet states, the level of trust in state institution, unfortunately, is low. And currently the trust in Ukraine society is not high to the public institutions, and small numbers of these institutions enjoy the trust of the majority of the populations. And I think actually there are some reasons when we look at the Western world and we look at the post-Soviet world. So the main factors, I would say the first one is the influence of history itself. When we're thinking about Western countries, they gain independence mostly like 100, 200, 300 years ago. So they had this experience of building up institutions for many years. They went through all mistakes like ups and downs, and they gained trust of people trying to satisfy their needs and interests. And when we are looking at Ukraine and at other post-Soviet countries, they gain independence only like for 30 years. And this is really a small period to expect institutions to be developed on high level, and also to expect people to gain trust. Because what is also important is regime which countries were in. And we know that democracy has been developing for a long time in Western countries, and Ukraine and other Soviet countries were under the Soviet Union, Soviet occupation, let's say in this way, where we cannot talk about democratic development of institutions. The institutions were developing at those time, but in a way to satisfy the authoritarian regime, but not think about people's need. Also, what is very important is geopolitical situation and geographical situation. When we're thinking about Ukraine, again, we have a neighbor, Russia, and we experience aggression from Russian side. And when you have external aggression, you don't have also much time to think about the development of internal institutions, because some of the resources spent on protect your territories or your boundaries, your land. And this is also different from Western countries because they can enjoy more geographical independence from authoritarian countries. Also, what is important to think is general trust between people, and development of health institutions and economic welfare. There is a very interesting study, empirical research, which is done by the Netherlands Bank in 2021, and they just tried to compare how all the pandemic situation influence the trust of people to the institutions. They choose two countries, America and the Netherlands, and the results were quite interesting. We showed that the high level of income, the more stability of economic situation, the most trust people have, and those trust is not changing so much even because of the pandemic. Because the Netherlands also support the citizens with a subsidy, or also if people lose a job, they have more possibility to support the time during the times they're looking for a job. And in America, situation is a bit different. The same was shown for the health system, that people who had already low level of health, like they were not so healthy, and they also suffered some health issues during COVID, the trust into the public institution decreased. But we can see it in a short-term perspective. It's already had influence. So the level of economic welfare, the health situation, and when we reflected to Ukraine and to post-Soviet countries, we see this unsatisfaction for a long period of time. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was 90s, and we all know that it was quite difficult economical period for Ukraine. Actually, we have just economic stagnation when the salaries were not paid, when people were losing their jobs, and it was just for quite some years. The same belongs to the medical system. Despite we have right now free medical services, but you still need to pay for pills, and sometimes people just thinking that it's not worth even going there. So the health state is already not in the best situation, and this have been happening like for many years. I would say only last 10 years we really saw some improvement in those areas, but again, it's not enough. To summarize, we can see that the society in the post-Soviet countries was dominated by, and actually continue to be dominated by, beliefs about the corruption in public institutions and dependencies on politicians and oligarchs' view. And in the end, what we can observe is a lack of transparency in communication from public institutions. Actually, it was also made a survey by Rosenkopf Center in March 2019 that mostly people in Ukraine trust to volunteer organizations. It was like 68%, armed forces 61%, and that's maybe I also want to talk later why. And also like state emergency services, 57%. But when we're talking about court, it was something around 12%. So that's like really very low level. And when we're thinking about the Netherlands is one of the countries with a traditionally high level of trust in state institutions. Among state institutions, actually courts and police are the dominant in the trust. It's more than 80%. So we can see that already in a long history and during the long period, the countries like the Netherlands, they have been building trust into the institutions. And when we're talking about Ukraine and post-Soviet countries, unfortunately, the situation is not like that. And what we're resulting into, who people trust in general. And we can say that people trust to the close circle of people. So they trust to the neighbor, they trust the family, they trust the friends. And this is great when you're thinking about just trust as trust to people. But when we're talking about experts this topic, like health, like police and all the things, I think what you want to see is that people trust to the institutions, because this is where experts are. And in the end, we also see, I think, the situation with vaccination would happen. Somehow in the Netherlands, majority of people are vaccinated. It's like more than 70%. And in Ukraine, I think only like it was 18, but lately increased till 28 or something, just because they heard some rumors. And the thing is that the role of the modern technologies are also quite high, because usually where we look for information, we look information in the internet, in the social media. And if you already have some prejudice, like beliefs in all these theories, what your neighbors say, you try to look for the confirmation of the information you know, that try to get information which is more relevant or really trustworthy. And of course, when you already been looking for the information which is not trustworthy and you want to confirm, we know how internet works. It works in a way that it tries to confirm information you already know. So in general, that's the situation with trust in Western world and in post-Soviet countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. I liked particularly the part when you stress that the situation of how we trust to our like small circle, even though it creates big like comfortable zone and strong bond and brings you much emotional happiness, but it down states the expertise, because really that way you don't gain the expertise that you need to make your decisions, something that is really like very important, not only for having good functional efficient institutions, but overall to provide with public services and share goods. Thank you very much. If you have time, or if you ever thought of the trust not only within the society but also outside world, I think it will be also interesting to listen to those observations, if you ever thought of talking about that. Because since you touched upon neighbors, I figure that it is in Armenia, it's kind of the same situation when we somehow gained, at maybe for short moments, some trust within Armenia, the new institutions that will be or are in the process of building, of being built. But what concerns the world outside of the country, like the world that surrounds us, I think we are losing that trust. And I guess if you're touching the topic of neighbors and overall, in Ukraine, it might be different with taking into consideration the Eastern Partnership agreement. Maybe you have trust to EU or European countries, I don't know. In Armenia, I'm not sure if like recent war even shrank the trust in the world overall. So yeah, this is additional question. You touch that only if you feel that you are prepared or you want to talk about it. And otherwise, it will be very interesting to listen to your like solutions, what we can do.
I think it's also interesting perspective you're thinking about, to trust to something what is, I would say, outside even of your country. And I think about Ukraine. We know the revolution which happened, and that was because I think Ukrainians had trust in the European values, and they want also those values to migrate to be implemented in institutions in Ukraine, and that's why we had all those revolutions. I don't have like a particular statistics for now about the trust to EU and maybe to NATO and to other countries from Ukrainian like perspective, from citizens. But what I would say, you know, just for young people and young people who try to find the right information, usually they use resources of EU or resources of other like reliable institutions and from the Western world, and they trust more resources, I think, of the Western world than resources which are spread in Ukraine. And the topic of improvement, yeah, of course, I also thought about and also want to give example of the Netherlands. But at the beginning, I was thinking also to talk about, for example, that I was talking that economic welfare and health is very important also in trustworthy and in trust of people to the institutions, because I mean in general, when you're happy, when you feel you are taking care in those areas, you trust more, because there is like a basic also like economic thing, like a pyramid of Maslow. So when your basic needs are satisfied, you're already happier and you feel that you can trust to the government institutions, and part of this really is on the institutional side. But unfortunately, the development of economic welfare and health is not a 1 year project, even not 2 years, not 5 years project. It can take decades to arrive in increasing of trust. The same as I was talking that in Western countries, it's have been doing for many years. But what I think we can do is to move to the concept of transparency, because the transparency movement embodies the hope that a combination of new technologies, publicity, accessibility data, right communication from institution side, and fresh activism can more effectively assist people in gaining trust to the public institutions. And also very interesting situation that the level of trust depends not only on the quality of those institutions give to us, but also about how they communicate the information to their stakeholders, basically to the society. And it was also very interesting study in a court system. So it was a study done by Dutch scientists, and they found out that relatively high level of trust in the courts have like this trend, that people in the Netherlands who never went to the court, they trust more to the court system than after they go into the court, because as I told you, it was like more than 80%. But of course, when you go to the court, you understand that sometimes the case may take much longer than you think, and the results can be not as you thought before. But in Ukraine, the situation is vice versa. So people trust less to the court when they do not go there than compared to the people who had experience going to the court, because mostly those experiences were not as bad as they expected. And the same is also the information what we get from media resources, because when we hear about the court system in Ukraine, it's only bad news that some judge got bribe, that the decision was made not in the way it should be made. And of course, people consume those information and they have this already vision of a court system which is not reliable. Of course, I mean, again, our court system is not perfect, but what I'm talking about, that it is also important to communicate about the progress what we are doing. And I'm not talking that we only need to show the positive results. We also can show results which was not positive or which were negative, but it's not only negative results, because in this way you can more or less have an overview of the situation in total and not only one side situation. And unfortunately, we can say that negative information just predominates about the public institution in Ukraine, we as a media. But media topic is like a separate one, because this we need to talk about the independence of media in Ukraine. And what I want to concentrate is mostly on the transparency of the communication of those institutions itself. So it is about the public institution producing the content itself that would be important to communicate. And honesty in those communication is very important for maintaining the trust of citizens. For example, a very good example also from the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, much attention is paid to external communication, that public institutions in the Netherlands prefer direct communications with the citizens through the most accessible channels is social media. And in the end, their official pages in more transparent and more interesting way for their stakeholders, also using not complicated language, but using language which can be understandable for every citizen. And it's also very interesting to see how they deliver those information. So they do not divide people, for example, on political interest. Usually they just target people depending on their interest, on an age group. So for example, if I want to reach like IND in the Netherlands, this is just an institution which is responsible for immigrants. I can call them, and I can also tag them in a Twitter. So if I'm like young person who uses Twitter very actively, I just write them there and get the information needed. And I think this is also a great example which can be utilized by Ukrainian institutions, because I mean, it doesn't require so much cost to invest, because I mean, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those resources you can use for free, and you can target different audience. And in this way, you can be also closer to people. And in this way, you can gain trust. I think, for example, TikTok is gaining popularity right now. Why not use it to target also young generations?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that technology in this way just play a key role, but also willingness from institutions to implement those changes and using technologies. And from this point of view, I also think that the second thing which is important is education. So education of institutions, employees, because we know that we always have lack of funds or lack of even willingness to make changes and to be educated in this area. But I think we cannot put also full responsibility only on institutions. We also should do self-education. And self-education means that you do not consume information just from your neighbor. If you get this information, just think, okay, how true is this information? Maybe you can just go to the internet, just Google and try to find some different views. And in the end, when you analyze some resources, you can arrive to the decision. And also what is important, I think, is just to read resources not only from Ukrainian or Russian, but also English-speaking English resources. And that's basically what is done, I would say, by young people who have these opportunities, but is not done for older generation. But I still think that it, like, some part of responsibility is on you as a person to try to gain right information. So this is like some factors what can increase trust of the society to institutions and in short-term perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it is. It's really not an easy thing, because even if changes seem easier if you try to change the institutions, But on the other hand, the communication currently is also challenged because, as you said, people are more like they have their opinions, and whatever information you give, they kind of compartmentalize. And depending from what party you come, or like what is, yeah, everything is politicized or ideologized. And like you can talk about your food preferences, but the person can come like think that, okay, then you are from this party or that party, and I don't want to listen to your interest. But I guess the point is that even though things are not very easy, and especially with the self-education, it's hard to push person to a self-education if he or she is comfortable with the ideas of propaganda, or I don't know, the ideas of whatever they are comfortable with. But still, the point is that even though it's hard, you can't cancel your own responsibility for your own life. And yeah, you may want be educated, or you may not want, but yeah, the consequences are on you. And this is with the COVID situation, but the hard thing also that sometimes the consequences that you have on yourself resulted by your own decisions sometimes can affect your, not sometimes, I guess very often they affect also the surrounding.
True.
So yeah, this is where we are, and we need to do something about that, however hard it sounds to me. Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting, and we are ready to sum up, I guess. If you have some last remarks, please go ahead.
Just like a short remark, so it is like economic changes, it will take some long time, but what we can do is just to be more transparent in our communication, to educate and to self-educate. This is
Yes.
my summarize of everything. My summary.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daria. It was really very interesting, like touching upon many spheres, but very witty and sharply. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me again. It was also interesting to talk, and I'm looking forward to see other opinions on this topic.